All right, bless your hearts. I hope you enjoy this documentary. We certainly enjoyed doing it. We met a gentleman, Dr. Joseph Mahan. Dr. Mahan, his work, one of the bright spots of his work, the Metcalfe Stone. He'll be telling you that. He has worked with Indian people all over this world, you might say, at least spanning from Iran, the Middle East, Near East, even into this great nation. The title of this documentary, we chose Hunter, for there was a chief that, on discussing and talking with Dr. Mahan, gave him an Indian name, Katahele, which is to say, hunter. Now, many of you would say, hunter, like a hunter of animals? No, considerably a deeper meaning, considerably a more depth to that thought, a hunter for truth. And is that not what really all we that enjoy studying deeper, even into the Father's Word or into a documentary such as this, to document fact and even to document fiction? But you're going to see a lot of fact here, and I want to thank Dr. Mahan personally for the fact that with his organization, we're able to meet many new people. The stones of this nation speak. The stones of the hills speak, if you'll listen, if you'll search, if you'll seek. So, Katahele, the hunter of truth. I hope you enjoy this documentary. All right, dear ones, here we are in Columbus, Georgia. In our travels over this nation, it's refreshing to find centers such as we have here in Columbus, Georgia, that is a focal point for all people that are interested in facts concerning history, this world, and the events that have transpired by generations long past. And I just want you to meet someone. I want you to meet someone that has dedicated his life to studies of this nature, and also to form a group that would be a catalyst that would pull together and help enable someone that was researching even on their own to obtain a platform whereby that research could be known. And it gives me great pleasure, and I'm just going to introduce you to him and just let him speak with you. It gives me great pleasure to present to you Dr. Joseph B. Mahan. Dr. Mahan, I know you're going to find, is through his Institute of the Study of American Cultures, a fascinating person and a very dedicated man to history, the nation, and facts. Dr. Mahan, God bless you. It's good to be with you.
Well, thank you. You're kind to come all the way to Georgia from western Arkansas. And of course, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about a subject in which I believe you are primarily interested, and that is the relationship of ancient America and pre-Columbian America to the rest of the world.
Yes, yes.
And the Institute for the Study of American Cultures, of which this is the home office, is devoted to promoting and generally assisting and distributing or disseminating information that relates to that subject. In other words, we, just as you say you're seeking the truth, we are seeking as near truth as we can get to it, whatever it may be. But the further our members have gone, and we now have about 250 members scattered throughout the country.
That's wonderful.
The more is discovered that not only was there no contact, but there was massive and continuous contact over long periods of time, and that many of the people that we know from ancient history in Europe, Asia, Africa, were in fact represented over here, and that many of the people we don't know much about in those areas that we simply know as, for instance, the Etruscans, probably had very large groups of relatives over here about whom we'll learn a great deal in time.
Wow. Well, that is wonderful. Pre-Columbian, that time, just for the layperson, could you...
Well, we mean, of course, before the discovery by Christopher Columbus in October of 1492. And pre-Columbian has a sort of common understanding, I think, come to mean that period in Middle and South America. But it relates equally well, of course, to North America. And by that we mean, because the reason that we picked that date is obvious, because most of our educators, most of our literature, and most of the popular understanding is to the effect that this is when any influence from Europe started.
I see.
And of course a great deal did start then, and colonization began then, and things were never the same. So that's what I mean by pre-Columbian. It's before 1492. And of course the descendants of the people who lived here. We're interested in their subsequent history down till now.
A person that is relatively new, perhaps not in seeking truth, but in pre-Columbian and some of the artifacts, the languages that are found around this nation, I've got to ask you, in all your searches, what was one of the most interesting points or signs and or markings that you might have come across that you found fascinating?
Well, I am sure, as far as anything I myself discovered, is the stone that we have here on the table, which we call the Metcalfe Stone,
yes. Mm-hmm.
which was found 15 miles from where we are sitting right now, and under undoubted valid context, and which has symbols on it that are from the Minoan Linear A syllabary.
I see.
Dating 1500 BC and thereabouts from the Mediterranean.
I know you speak of this Metcalfe Stone in your book titled The Secret.
Well, I happen to have a copy of it here, of course.
I want to just hold it right up there and let's take a look at it there. This is how I came to be acquainted with Dr. Mahan. I finished reading this book, The Secret, and I went directly to the telephone and made myself acquainted. The phone number had been passed on by a friend, and I found it a fascinating study. The contact that he has had with people not only in America but in the Middle East and Iran, Iraq, and other places, and other studies that he has done there. I found it to be a fascinating book. I know, and I highly recommend it. I think that most would enjoy it. It is very good reading, and it is factual, it is documented, and I found it to be quite interesting. Dr. Mahan, if I may, I'm going to turn the Metcalfe Stone up, whereby it may be picked up on the camera, and perhaps you can just tell the folks a little
All right,
about
do that,
the
please, and I will tell you about it, yes.
Okay.
All right, it is a piece of Georgia sandstone. Let's be sure that we get it turned right here. I believe that's the way it goes. And the characters are incised here. They are done with a hard metal tool and not with flint or with a stone. It was found in 1967 in a rock pile on the Fort Benning Reservation by an employee of Fort Benning who was there with permission, picking out certain pieces of stone to take home and build barbecue pit and a terrace or something he was building in his backyard. He happened to be an artist and a rather informed, very informed individual who, and he of course saw the characters on this one after he had gotten home with it and washed the mud off and realized that there must be some form of writing. At that time, I was the curator of the Columbus Museum here in this city and already had something of a reputation for the section that the museum devoted to the history of the American Indians or the pre-Columbian people of this area. So he brought the stone to me, and I told him it was indeed writing, but I wasn't capable of right now telling him what kind of writing, even though I had a suspicion. It, from the beginning, clearly it showed that it was a Mediterranean type letter. And of course, fortunately, we were able to get a hold of Cyrus Gordon, who was then the head of the Department of Mediterranean Studies at Brandeis University in Massachusetts. And Dr. Gordon, I had become a little shy by now of sending material of this kind to American scholars and telling them that it was found in the United States, because this immediately cut them off, and they didn't, it wasn't possible, so it wasn't found. But we had reason to think Dr. Gordon was a much wider frame of mind and receptive. So I sent it to him as curator of a museum and told him this had come into our possession. What was it? And he immediately told me it was Mediterranean. It was Mediterranean, mid-3rd millennium BC. Where did you get it? He said. And so we told him, and 2 or 3 days later he was here to see about it. And we took him out and introduced him to the rock pile and a good many other circumstances surrounding the finding of it. And it was put into a chimney that was built about 1840, and that was before the scholars in Europe had seen anybody had discovered this particular form of syllabary. It was discovered by Sir Arthur Evans first on Crete in 1899.
1899.
And so it would have been very difficult for somebody to have forged this.
Absolutely.
And put it into a fireplace in Georgia in 1840. So.
Absolutely.
Anyway, he then said it was just the same as I'm telling you now, that it's in the writing, in the characters of the Minoan Linear A script, with 2 exceptions. 2 symbols on here are not recognizable. It has several numbers, which indicates that it's a list of some kind. Mm-hmm. But of course the syllables have certain sounds that we know from Linear A, but this doesn't make any particular sense. It's also almost as though you made yourself a grocery list and put 1 DEG, or something like you wanted 1 dozen eggs.
Wow.
But you would have to know English and a good many other. So that's at the point that any translation has proceeded with it.
Well, it is fascinating that we find stones such as this, regardless of the translation, when we document, because of the type of character, that that there were educated people here, yes, even before Columbus's time, and going back to this extreme, found even here. It's fascinating, and I know I can understand how this would have been one of the more exciting finds.
As I said, personally, that was because I did feel that I certainly helped discover that one. Now, the account of that is, of course, written out in here with the. But I also, would you like for me to proceed with another one of our discoveries here in this area? The discovery of this and the publicity that went along with it led to the discovery of a cuneiform tablet from LaGrange, Georgia, which is 45 miles north of here, up the river. It is from the 3rd dynasty of Ur. It translates as an inventory of offerings to the goddess Inanna. It mentions sheep, and several things that you wouldn't expect to see listed in Georgia in that period, because it's the third dynasty, as I've said. It mentions that it's the 38th year of the reign of one Yuchi, who was the second of the three kings of that dynasty, as I understand it. And the 38th year of his reign translates to 2040 BC. And that stone, we have proved, certainly to our satisfaction, that it was not only found on the spot in LaGrange, that a Mrs. Hearn, who had lived on the spot all of her life, she was in 70-ish, was out digging in her flower yard one day and dug it up. But it was also made there, is what we're saying. So I helped call attention to it and to get it translated, and it is also published in the secret.
Wow. Isn't it amazing how many finds are found in such an innocent way at times, such as a lady digging in a flower pot bed or something of that nature. I found the account of that in the book, The Secret, and it is fascinating that it would seem that this particular area here in Georgia had a rich heritage. It certainly does.
Well, of course, we were this was the capital town immediately in this area of the Creek Nation in the late 18th and early 19th century. And just as it has been in Oklahoma, the Creek Nation is made up of several different peoples, very prominently among whom are the Yuchis. And this happened to be the immediate area of the Yuchis. And fortunately, many years ago, even before the Metcalfe Stone was found, I became personally acquainted with the hereditary chief of the Yuchis, who, of course, had spent much of his life as on the council of the kings and warriors of the Creek Nation and so on, who came back here to visit the ancestral homelands, but who himself had in his possession and his knowledge vast information going back to the earlier times, and some of that is included in The Secret. A great deal of it is included in his papers and materials that are in Columbus College here.
That is, you know, he has in his office, he has a beautiful painting of, is that of this chief?
That's Chief S.W. Brown right there.
That we'll be sharing it with you here in a moment, and his friendship and his acquaintance in his writings is a fascinating thing.
Well, of course, the entire thesis of The Secret here is based upon a letter that Chief Brown wrote me, in which he said the time had come to, for certain of this information to come to light, and that there were certain aspects of The Secret, the greatest and grandest of all, must be kept until another time when we know a little more, to make a long story short. And so I then showed how a great many things had unraveled. Exactly, of course. And about the Yuchis and Creeks themselves, of course, in here, and their green corn ceremony, which we might just as well be perfectly honest about it, is the ceremony prescribed for the Hebrews in the 23rd chapter of Leviticus. It's exact. It's the way it's held at the time, and with the kindling of the fire and all aspects of it. And I've been there on various occasions, and most of the Yuchis know this, but they want to make a point that they did not get it from the missionaries.
If you were to just to the viewing audience explain the Yuchis, what would you say, just to give a very simple introduction to them?
All right, the Yuchis were, in the 19th century, one of the smaller tribes here in the southeast. They were part of the Creek Nation, but historians, as I am, know that earlier the Yuchis had been a very important segment of the southeast, and had in fact been the people known as the Shawano, who of course the Shawnee are also descended from. And these were the religious priests who represented both the earth and the sky, and were called Shah, which is the Yuchi word that means eagle, snake, or both, and was, of course, our version of Quetzalcoatl.
Oh, from Mexico.
Yes.
Well, that is fascinating. Would it be all right if Charlene lifted that from the wall?
She certainly may. I don't think it'll be any problem.
Be very careful there. We're going to have Charlene bring a picture of this chief. I was amazed at the wisdom, not too amazed, coming from Oklahoma, but yet on a deeper level. It's always wonderful to learn new information. If you could just come right around and bring it up between us here and let Mike focus in. And Doctor, if you would, introduce the chief.
Well, this is Chief Samuel W. Brown, Jr. He and his father together were chiefs of the Yuchi from 1867 until 1957. And Chief Brown became chief in 1916 when his father retired, but his father lived till 1936 when he was almost 100 years old. They were the last of the hereditary line of chiefs that the Yuchis had.
Wow.
And they were in fact sun kings in the tradition of sun kings. And this is a part of our history that we know for sure here. And Mr. Brown had spent his life, of course, studying the Yuchis, their connections, their history, and a good deal else of the world's history. So he was one of the best informed people on subjects in which I was interested of anybody I've ever met.
Well, I certainly admire you for having had this man as a friend and having the opportunity to talk with him.
Anyway, Lou Firth was a friend of his when he was living down in south of San Antonio in Texas, where his family took him in the last years for the better climate. And he painted that portrait.
Well, that's fascinating. Okay.
I have just mentioned the green corn ceremony, or the new fire of the Yuchis, and I happen to have a print from a painting done some 30 years ago by courtesy of the Pontiac Company, who put out a whole series of these scenes of Indian rituals. This one shows the creek, and including the Yuchis, of course, I presume, and the new fire ceremony. Since I have been present on these on various occasions, I must point out that it is not completely accurate by any means. But the 4 logs are correct. The fire is kindled at the point of the 4 logs. Of course, they are oriented to the north and south, and this log should be pointing to the middle of that arbor, which is to the north. The arbors are open. They certainly do not have scalps hanging, as seems to be the case up there. This has nothing to do with the war dances or the our scalps. So the artist did take certain liberties, but it does show various of the traditional historic costume that the people had here in this area, and of course have still used in Oklahoma. You notice various people are wearing turbans, such as that one right there, which was a common headdress. Others are wearing a feather crown, as that shows, and certainly certain of the chiefs here, particularly who would sit in that arbor, wore these indicating their descent from the sky, in addition to being the earth. In other words, this is an 8-day ceremony, which begins near the middle of July. They use it now, of course, on a weekend, but it's the nearest possible to the middle of July, when the moon is right and some other things. And it lasts for 8 days. There are arbors or tents built around the outer square, around this square area, in which the families reside during the time of the ceremony. And there's 1 day of fasting, and there is the kindling of the new fire, and there is the carrying of boughs and the singing and other things that we're told specifically to do in the 23rd chapter of Leviticus. So knowing a great many other things that we know now, we have no hesitancy at all in pointing out the kinship, I think, the common origin of the 2 ceremonies. I say, so long as we're careful to point out that this was not done by the Baptist Methodist missionaries, who, of course, were not given to holding this particular ceremony and knew very little about it except what they had read in Leviticus. That is why we know that it is an original ceremony. And of course it still goes on in Oklahoma, thankfully. And,
Dr. Mahan, I always find it interesting and fascinating because I know what type of person it takes to try to provide a platform for a drive or a hunger that he has to bring forth facts and truth to people that, and our audience here would say that it's a starving world for facts anymore. And I must say, I compliment you on your efforts of pulling together such experienced, but even more so dedicated people. And I would like for you to tell us a little bit, if you would, how you were driven or how it came to be that you felt that a platform would be helpful.
Well, I guess we'll have to look a little bit at my educational background. I have been a historian as long as I can remember. It's been a matter of great interest to me, particularly the aspect that I call the culture of people. In other words, how they live, their customs, and so on. I've also been very interested and had a certain amount of academic training in the colonial period and in Old World history and anthropology. So after a while it became clear to me that there were vast relationships in the cultures of all of these areas, and particularly here in the Southeast, where as early as the 17th century and 18th century certain writers were pointing out that the resemblances of the culture they saw around them, James Adair for one, and what he knew of the culture of biblical times in the Old World. And my work with the Columbus Museum here in this city as curator, and as we developed an Indian museum there, gave me the opportunity to become acquainted with certain people and who had much the same interest and much the same viewpoint. One of the first one of whom, interestingly enough, was an Oklahoman with whom I believe you've talked, and this was Gloria Farley, who had discovered the Heaven Runestone and was trying to convince academics throughout that somebody carved Norse runes on the mountainside there at Hema, and they said nonsense and all. And this lady is not exactly the type you say nonsense to. She
That's right.
set to work and has proved them wrong many times. I also became acquainted with another Oklahoman who now is at Wake Forest University, whose name is Cyclone Covey. He is the old world historian at Wake Forest, but he also has been interested in this same question as to the origins and histories of the American Indians. There are fortunately various others, so it was a sort of a growing situation. And we first had some conferences at Westville, south of here, which is a living history museum showing Georgia in the year 1850 that I had helped create. And they had a camp meeting tabernacle. Do you know what a tabernacle is?
Yes.
Built in 1840 that we had moved there and set up, which was so we felt like that in that historic setting would be a very good place to bring together these scholars for the first time. And in 1973 there were 75 of them who assembled there. And so we've kept a tight organization since that time, and then in 1983 we formally organized what is the Institute for the Study of American Cultures. And I hate to even begin mentioning the people who are members of this, because many of them have worked much more extensively and have made much greater contributions even than I have. And of course one of them is Dr. Barry Fell, who is the president of the Epigraphic Society. And we have some of his volumes over there, but he has done 18 volumes. The 18th one is now coming out, of translations that relate to the... so it's no longer anybody who doesn't know that writing was extensive among the American people, that most of this was in writing that was also languages that are known in other parts of the world, and that there was vast commerce and travel back and forth, simply are not as we say, with it. And we are attempting, of course, to interest and to inform people who are interested in it. And that's why we actually, with your audience, I'm making an appeal for members, anybody who is really interested.
Well,
we have the, for $30 a year, which is our regular membership fee, you get one of these every 2 months. You get invited to our conference in June, where we discuss these things out, and you get periodic other mailings and so on. Plus, we try to answer your questions. And if I can't do it, I try to get one of our members who can on particular points.
I've read several of these, and it is true there are just some wonderful explanations of everything from digs to other people that you would consider to be famous people in this field, and giving their opinions, and with the president being Dr. Mahan, he himself has input into it. Really, it's kind of our cup of tea, if you know what I mean.
I think you might be interested. We are now running a column called Recovered Truths, which are things that I feel and our membership feels has been proved beyond any reasonable doubt at all. And it's a considerable list, but we've only published 3 things so far that.
Well, it is fascinating. It's well worth, if you're interested in the culture of peoples, the nation, the world, the community, then I even note Japanese inscriptions here.
Well, the Japanese, we have some Japanese members who have discovered that some of their petroglyphs, the carvings on stone over there, are actually translatable and readable in Sumerian cuneiform.
Well, this puts you in touch with people.
Could we give them our mailing address?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, it's Isaac, of course, or the Institute for the Study of American Cultures, Post Office Box 1658, Columbus, Georgia, 31902. And as I said, we'd be happy to send you extra material or a brochure or enlist you as a member and send you materials.
And we're going to show you that again at a later time here, because I want him to share about his book as well as we come to the end of this hour. But I think it is just fascinating that you and the organization here have pulled together groups of people. Cyclone Covey, as an example, I'm going to just, if it's possible, I would like for you to see if we could do a documentary with him. This is what I'm talking about, is through this man and men like him that are dedicated to this, it puts us in touch with people that have facts and documentation that we need to know about when we look at the past history of this world and the people therein. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, you said we would talk about the secret.
Yes.
I've already said what the theme of it was, and I'm going to borrow a thought from another well-known Oklahoman when I say that really all I did was just write down what I had read in not in this case the newspapers, but information that from various sources, which relates to the fact that of the one world and the discoveries that are going on all the time, showing this. And the book may be ordered from me at the same address as the Isaac, and it is $22.50 for the book and $2.50 for package and postage.
So that would be, say, $25. $25, and this is there is a great deal of information in this book, down to the documentation. We have page 244. Is it all right if I give it a little plug?
You may indeed.
I think he has a very fascinating approach that was new to me, and I think it will be to most. And I don't want to give away a great deal of the input.
You may give away whatever you wish, because it's
But the fact that in Iran and in Turkey.
Well, particularly in Pakistan,
Right,
which is where I spent 6 months back in 1977.
There's one
And
picture I want to show them. It's got to be further back. But go ahead about Pakistan.
Well, I was just saying that the Indus Valley, the ancient civilization there, undoubtedly is related to our old civilizations here. And that's what I was doing in Pakistan, studying that. But
Weren't you
I
there
discovered
for-
that there were more directly. Here shows a turban that we saw a man wearing one day in Pakistan today, and a very similar turban from a painting in the 19th century showing one of the Shawano wearing them.
And consider that turban to Sequoia, which we did a documentary on not long ago.
Yes, Sequoia wore turbans.
And this is a part of this. So it is well written, and I'm just sure that you'll find it very interesting. So $25, and we will show you that address. It will help this work of gathering information, and that's what it's all about. And we just we appreciate.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate certainly your coming, and I'm sure that there are several of our members that you would do well to talk to.
Oh, we're looking forward that perhaps we can meet them. Cyrus Gordon, what a fascinating person, what a documentary that would be, that he could share some thoughts with the people just in a format that...
Well, you mentioned the Christian inscriptions in West Virginia, and were published and all with the Christmas message. Mrs. Ida Jane Gallagher, who brought those to everybody's attention, is one of our members and lives in South Carolina. She is also a very interesting person that would tell you about that.
Do you think she would invite us?
I think she would if you ask her to.
Well, great, great. Well, we'll be looking forward to that, and we'll explain that, those inscriptions, as we do that. I know you'll enjoy them. There are so many places. There are hundreds of places, aren't there, Doctor, around this country where letterings, pictographs, syllabaries, and as you have seen in several cases, such as at Back Creek and Newark in Ohio, actual Phalo-Hebrew, and of course with some change. Man, when you go back to that time, man didn't carry around a modern dictionary to see that he kept everything online. And plus, as the good doctor mentioned earlier, an alphabet is only an alphabet. A language can be a different language altogether.
And of course, alphabets change over time as well, and we have examples of your pre. Right. And of course, the Canaanite script that we find a great deal here is simply an earlier form of your.
Could you say a word about the Canaanites? I know you have a very good, you have a good portion. Too long a subject for now.
Well, I'll simply say that the Canaanites, of course, are given a rather harsh treatment in the Old Testament, but they were very a Semitic people, very closely related to the Hebrews, and they were here. They are the people we call the Kana people here. The Canary Islands were named for them. They were seafaring people, and some of the Kanas were part of the Yuchi.
Wow, that is interesting.
And of course, I do have a little dealing with that in there, but there's now much more. I think that we can say this with a great deal of confidence. Mr. Paul Chapman of Atlanta, who has done much work on navigation and on the Norse and Columbus, had become interested independently on the matter of the Canary Islands, and just who exactly the Canary Islanders were that Columbus said were the same when he first saw these people in the Caribbean, that they were the same as the people of the Canary Islands. And these, we are quite sure, are the Canaanites, and that Canary is named for them and not for the anything to do with dogs.
The question that would come to one's mind is the fruit that you have observed the organization producing. Could you share a little bit?
Well, I'll be happy to do that. The organization, I think, is simply facilitating the work of a great many individuals and organizations and groups. And there are 3 statements that we have published of which I've had no with which I've had no argument at all, that we feel are recovered truths that Isaac has been able to help establish. And I'll simply give you these and then tell you a couple of other things I think that definitely we've accomplished. One is there is no reasonable doubt whatever that Europe, Asia, and Africa, people from here travel freely to and from the Americas across both the Atlantic and Pacific, and explored and sojourned on both continents for millennia prior to 1492. This truth has been made known through the monumental work of Barry Fell and the members of the Epigraphic Society in translating written messages left by these peoples in the course of their worldwide activities. And as I've said, they've traced literate people all over the world. They've done the translations. They've published them in 18 volumes of the Epigraphic Society papers, and there's no disputing it. Second is, there was direct contact between Hebrews of the Roman Empire and people in what is now East Tennessee. And of course, you have done some things, you work on this yourself. This has been proved conclusively by the investigations done by J. Houston McCulloch of Ohio State University into the context, style, and meaning of the inscription on the Back Creek Stone. And three, there were Ogham-writing, Celtic-speaking astronomers familiar with Old World mythology in the contiguous areas of Oklahoma, Colorado, and New Mexico for an extended length of time. At least once they were called Druids by other savants writing with the Numidian alphabet. This is attested by the Anubis cave inscriptions discovered by Gloria Farley and numerous similar discoveries in that area by Mrs. Farley, Philip Leonard, and William McLawn.
You know, it is strange that what do you think, and this is, you don't even have to answer this if you don't like. What do you think is at the bottom of the fact that these, I'll call it the system, I don't know what it is, I'll call it the system, that it doesn't want to recognize that history should at least be amended or something?
Well, I hate to say this, but ignorance is usually behind the resistance to new ideas anywhere. And ignorance is a difficult thing to dispel. It's with us always. And it does take an effort on somebody's part to abandon entirely information and a system of learning that they have been taught throughout, and to take up with something that will perhaps put them in disfavor with their fellows, if nothing else, but which really they don't think exists in the first place. They just simply don't know about most of the material. They know in advance that material such as the thing that we're doing and some of our members, even though we're academicians and most of us have rather reputable credentials, we must be a little nuts. All right, this isn't worth bothering with. If you don't look, it will go away. And unfortunately, there has been a great deal of that throughout. But it's not peculiar to us. It's this happens with any system of learning. If you read what all happened in the Middle Ages when new ideas began to creep in. And but I do say that it is certainly my observation that information does spread rather rapidly and rather easily sometimes when it gets out, and I gather you are certainly helping to do that sort of thing.
That is our goal.
And so are a great many other people, and so much of this is, and much that I have not even touched on, and a great deal else that I'm sure I have no idea relating to it, that there is much more information out there even yet than has been brought forth. So it's a sort of exciting thing to be into, and I appreciate the opportunity of our talking to your subscribers and your viewers.
Well, it is our pleasure, and with great thanks, that you've invited us in, that we could meet you and that you would share these things with us. And I know that we're going to have a long friendship because you're one of our kind of people, that you are driven with a desire to protect heritage, to protect history, well, to protect truth. Is that not the bottom line?
Well, I think so. I would like to think this anyway.
Yes.
And of course, professionally, I am a historian, a cultural historian. My work, when I'm not working with Isaac, is with the Planning Commission for the City of Columbus and the adjacent area, where I do historic preservation planning, trying to preserve what we can and reuse our buildings and our physical heritage.
I can't help this. We're sitting right now in the Rankin Building, and what is it that's right across the street from
It's the Springer Opera House, which is an 1871 classic opera house,
71.
which has managed to be preserved, and for the last 25 years now has been reused and restored very beautifully. It's used by a local theater group and by various other organizations and traveling shows and things of this sort. And we are indeed very proud of it. It was a very handsome building.
And this is a hotel, and it is being used. It's very well maintained, and the Historical Society in parts of it, they're restructuring and so forth. But what a fascinating sight to see this old opera house that Caruso stayed here, along with others that performed.
Oscar Wilde was here.
Oscar Wilde.
And when Oscar Wilde, we know from the newspapers, 1879 maybe, when he left here to go to the opera house a half block down the street, his velvet-clad feet didn't touch the ground because the ladies of the town strewed the walk with flower petals.
Oh, well. Well, it has been a real pleasure that we were able to spend this time, and I just want to shake your hand and thank you again.
And I hope you will come back to Columbus, Georgia.
We're going to do it. What an amazing town, history itself. So, there, dear ones, we thank the people that have dedicated their lives. You know, some of us, basically, we sit back. There are educators that care. And you know what I mean by care. They care about bringing facts to you that can be documented. They may seem to be the Metcalf Stone. It may seem to be very insignificant to some. You might say, well, why couldn't that have been done in a script that would look very well presented even in a king's house? Well, the whole world isn't a king's house. Language, communication has always been, you might say, the base and the very thing that solidifies the human endeavor to get along, to have an agreement. This possibly could be a contract. A contract for what? Food, next crop of potatoes, or repayment of next crop of potatoes, boundary lines, agreeing with this branch or that branch. We know one thing. It is a language that has been used in a great, over a large part of the world. I will just leave it like that. And to me, it is precious, and it is more beautiful than had it been done in a fancy script. Because were it in a fancy script, it would be a fake. But no, it's in the legitimate character of this day. And how wonderful it is to place your hand upon something that was a contract or an agreement, a message conveyed for better understanding. And as we listen to the stones, and as these hills talk, if we'll listen, if we'll let our minds move the tent pegs to take in more, and listen to our people of yesteryear, then how fantastic it is, and how blessed it is that we meet people like Dr. Mahan that dedicate their lives to preserving and bringing facts into history itself. Well, there you have it, Columbus, Georgia, in the office, the president of Isaac, Dr. Joseph Mahan.
Thank you.
Doctor, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. It has been a great pleasure, and thank you very much.
And what about the Metcalfe Stone? I wish I had a great deal more to report on it than I do. There have been different opinions. Some say, well, it is an IOU, as though you would write one, this man owes me so much for so much, because there are about 4 letters that are distinguishable, letter A and B, and they are numbers. And then you take Hebrew, Philo-Hebrew, modern Hebrew, Greek, all letters are numbers. So it leaves a great deal of wonderment, in as much as no one knows exactly. I would like to add what I think the man was trying to say. I am not saying this is fact, but we must always learn to use our common sense and to know that there is one sign, there is one thing that God placed in the heavens for signs and even a method of communication, and that is the star system of the heavens. I want to refer to that, if I may, as we go to the stone. First, I will just point out briefly the letters that can be identified with an alphabet. The letter A and B, which were discovered, as the good doctor has reported to us, here a hieroglyphic. But I want to point out also these, and how precious it would be if I could be showing you the stone itself now instead of a photograph, because these are the most perfectly little drilled holes in the stone itself, which you will note that this drilled hole has the sun sign going out from it, which in my mind I have no doubt that it represents the sun, because here we have what we would call, I'll just say it in lay language, the North Star. And this, of course, being the Big Dipper. This is undeniable. So naturally, inasmuch as the sun hinges on this drilled spot, and the Big Dipper, a heavenly body, being drilled in this spot, the North Star, that the message surely must have something to do with the heavens. That is to say, the planet system, the star system. Now, this is my opinion and my opinion only. You will note there is an alignment between the sun, this particular drilled spot, and this figure. Oftentimes, square is symbolic of the earth, 4 square, 4 directions, and so forth. And as I stated, this is simply something for you to think about. You will notice this figure here. It is not a letter, but it is definitely and absolutely a bracket, as though it is shielding the sun from here being where the artist was. And we see probably the moon passing in between, meaning there was an eclipse. This bracket being the sign of the eclipse, inasmuch as the sun was shielded from here, giving the direction, the Big Dipper. We could go on for a long time talking about this. The other star systems, but I think that it would be better that we wait before we come to too many conclusions on the stone, for there is so much information. There is a star system that I could align with this that is very interesting. But I think for another time and another place, inasmuch as another work that we are working on now could give us a more in-depth understanding even on the Metcalfe Stone. I look forward to that. I don't want you to think I'm leaving you hanging, but we must be very careful. We must be very careful when We make claims, and I would have you know that what I just discussed with you is not a claim, but input into your mind to have you think for a moment on these things. Could a man being located very near Columbus, Georgia, have observed an eclipse and recorded it? I think so. I really think that this could be a record of an eclipse. It's something we certainly want to take into consideration. I think the location is probably given, the time rather, inasmuch as the rest could be a calendar as well as it could an IOU, a calendar giving us the time that that eclipse took place. We'll be working some more on that as time goes by, when we can be more sure of ourselves. And it is exciting that another documentary we're working on will probably identify one or two more characters on the stone. Will that be helpful? Gaining knowledge is always helpful. I hope you've enjoyed this documentary as much as we have in making it, in meeting this fine gentleman, and enjoying the fruits of his labor, the knowledge that he has brought forth. And it certainly has been a pleasure spending this time with him in that fine city and enjoying that old city, Columbus, Georgia. The hills speak, the stones speak. The minds that God created all deliver a message. Beloved, Columbus, Georgia, the Metcalfe Stone. And you know what? You are there.